You should spend less time looking at your watch and more time learning how to be a human being. Hannah stood on the wet pavement, her eyes locked on the man in the tailored suit. Rain beaded on his shoulders, but he remained perfectly still, watching her with a quiet, terrifying curiosity. She gestured toward the elderly man trembling on the ground near the luxury sedan. Wealth doesn't give you the right to treat people like a stain on your clothing, Hannah said, her voice vibrating with heat. You're a textbook example of silver spoon arrogance. The stranger didn't explain. He didn't mention that the victim on the ground was a professional scammer he'd caught extorting people. He simply tucked his wallet away and stepped closer, forcing Hannah to tilt her head back. He studied her with a quiet, terrifying curiosity, as if he were cataloging a rare species of person he hadn't encountered in years. You have a lot to say about a situation you don't understand, he said. His voice was a low, dangerous velvet. Hannah let out a sharp, mocking breath. I understand enough. You have a big bank account and a very small soul. She turned on her heel and disappeared into the gray soul mist, leaving the most powerful man in the city standing in the rain. The executive floor of Apex International was silent enough to hear the hum of the air conditioning. Hannah straightened her blazer, her posture the result of 3 years of disciplined excellence. Hannah, her retiring boss Mrs. Kong said with a weary smile. I've built this legacy for 30 years. I wouldn't trust it or my son to anyone but you. You're the heartbeat of this office. Hannah bowed slightly, a swell of pride grounding her. I'll make sure he succeeds, ma'am. The heavy doors at the end of the hall swung open. A man walked in, his silhouette tall and imposing against the floor-to-ceiling windows. He moved with a slow, predatory grace, unbuttoning his charcoal jacket as he reached the head of the table. Hannah's breath hitched. The air suddenly felt thin. It was the eyes. The dark, unreadable gaze from the rain last night. Siwoo didn't look at his mother. He walked straight to the edge of the desk where Hannah stood. He leaned in, his voice a low simmer only she could hear. A small soul. The room went deathly silent. Hannah felt the blood drain from her face. Siwoo watched her for a beat, the corner of his mouth twitching. I'm Siwoo, your new CEO. Mrs. Kong, he always loved to address his mom by her name in a professional setting, has told me a lot about you. I suspect, Miss Hannah, that we are going to spend a lot of time together. He pulled back just enough to look her in the eye, then turned to address his mom, leaving Hannah standing in a trance, the realization of her mistake hitting her like a physical blow. The silence in the room didn't break until the heavy doors clicked shut behind Siwoo. Hannah stood frozen, her fingers digging into the leather folder in her hands. She could still feel the phantom heat of his breath against her ear. The small soul comment was a ghost in the room, hanging over her like a heavy cloud. Hannah, are you all right? Mrs. Kong asked, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. Hannah forced a smile, though her heart was hammering against her ribs. Yes, ma'am. Taking it all in. It's a big change. He's a lot to handle, Mrs. Kong whispered, looking toward the door where her son had disappeared. But he's fair. Usually. Hannah spent the next 3 hours in a state of quiet panic. She sat at her desk, which sat right outside the CEO's massive glass office, and stared at her computer screen. She tried to focus on the transition schedule, but all she saw was the rainy street and the way Siwoo had looked at her when she called him a small soul. At 2 p.m. the intercom buzzed. It was a sharp, aggressive sound. Miss Hannah. My office. Now. Hannah stood up, smoothed her skirt and took a deep breath. She walked in and found Siwoo sitting behind the desk. He wasn't looking at a computer. He was looking at a single piece of paper, her resume printed. 3 years, he said, not looking up. You started in the junior pool. You caught a $10 million error in the Busan branch files. My mother promoted you on the spot. I was just doing my job, sir, Hannah said, keeping her voice steady. Your job, he repeated. He finally looked up. His eyes were even darker in the office light. And does your job description include screaming at strangers in hotel driveways? Hannah's face heated up. Sir, about last night. I misunderstood the situation. I thought. You thought you were a hero, he interrupted. He stood up and walked to the window looking out at the Seoul skyline. You saw a man in a suit and a man in rags, and you decided who the villain was before anyone spoke. That's a dangerous trait for a PA, Hannah. It means you let your emotions blind you to the facts. Hannah bit her lip. She wanted to defend herself, to say that she hated seeing people bullied, but she knew it would only make things worse. It won't happen again. It won't, he agreed, turning back to her. He dropped a thick stack of blue folders on the desk. These are the last 5 years of our U.S. distribution audits. There are inconsistencies. I want a full report on every single one by 8 a.m. tomorrow. Hannah stared at the stack. It was at least 1,000 pages. Sir, that's impossible. It's already mid-afternoon. Siwoo sat back down and picked up a pen, dismissing her without a second glance. I thought you were the heartbeat of this office, Miss Hannah. Prove it. Or find a job where your big soul is enough to pay the bills. Hannah picked up the folders. Her hands were shaking, not from fear but from a sudden sharp spark of anger. He wasn't just giving her work, he was testing her. He wanted her to break. She walked out of the office and sat at her desk. She didn't look at the time. She didn't look at the other staff members heading home at 6 p.m. She just opened the first folder and started to work. She was going to show him exactly why she belonged in this chair, even if it took her all night. By 9 p.m. the executive floor was a ghost town. The only light came from the blue glow of Hannah's monitor and the dim safety lamps along the hallway. Her eyes burned, and the numbers on the audit sheets were starting to dance across the page. Yore, Hannah's work bestie, stopped by her desk on her way out. She was dressed for a night out, her earrings sparkling under the office lights. You're still here? Yore asked, her voice tilting with a mix of pity and something else Hannah couldn't quite name. Hannah, it's Friday night. That stack looks like a death sentence. Did the new Prince Charming really give you all of that? He wants it by 8 a.m., Hannah said, rubbing her temples. He's testing me, Yore. He wants to see if I'll quit. Yore leaned against the desk, looking towards Siwoo's closed office door. He's being so mean to you. It's totally unfair. If it were me, I'd probably cry. You're so strong for staying. She reached out and patted Hannah's hand, but her eyes were busy scanning the top folder. Do you want me to stay and help? I mean, I have plans, but... No go, Hannah sighed. It's my mess to clean up. I'm the one who opened my mouth in the rain. Well, don't work too hard, Yore said, heading for the elevator. As the doors closed, a small, satisfied smile played on Yore's lips, a smile Hannah didn't see. An hour later, the door to the CEO's office swung open. Siwoo walked out, his tie loosened and his sleeves rolled up. He stopped when he saw Hannah still hunched over her desk. He looked at her, then at the half-empty cup of cold coffee sitting next to her keyboard. You're still here, he said. It wasn't a question. I'm finishing the 2024 records, sir, Hannah replied without looking up. I'll start the 2025 files shortly. Siwoo walked closer. He picked up her cold coffee cup, made a face at the dark liquid and set it back down. The office kitchen is empty. Go home, Miss Hannah. You look like you're about to fall over. I have a job to do, she said, her voice tight. And I don't leave things half done. Especially not when my big soul is on the line. Siwoo stood there for a long moment. The silence between them wasn't cold like it was in the morning. It was quiet, filled with the hum of the city outside. He walked away toward the break room and returned a few minutes later holding a fresh, steaming cup of coffee. He set it down on her desk. It's black. No sugar. It'll keep you awake. Hannah looked at the cup, then up at him. Thank you. Don't thank me yet, Siwoo said, his voice dropping to that low, serious tone. I found a mistake in the 2023 summary you just finished. Page 42. You missed a decimal point. If I hadn't caught it, we would have overpaid the vendor by $60,000. Hannah's heart sank. I'll fix it right now. Accuracy matters more than speed, Hannah, he said. He turned to leave but stopped at the door. My mother said you were the heartbeat of this place. But even a heart stops if it's pushed too hard. Finish the 2024 files and go. That's an order. He disappeared back into his office. Hannah took a sip of the bitter, hot coffee. It was strong, exactly what she needed. She flipped back to page 42, her jaw set in determination. He was watching her every move, waiting for her to fail. She wasn't going to give him the satisfaction. Monday morning arrived with a heavy gray sky. Hannah had spent her entire weekend resting her eyes, but the moment she stepped back into the office, the tension returned. She had finished the 2024 files as ordered, but something about the numbers was bothering her. As she sat at her desk, Yore walked by holding 2 expensive-looking lattes. She set one on Hannah's desk with a bright smile. You look exhausted, babe, Yore said, her voice loud enough for the nearby staff to hear. I can't believe he made you work all night Friday. People are already whispering that he's trying to push you out so he can bring in his own team from America. Hannah took the coffee, feeling a lump in her throat. I'm not leaving that easily, Yuri. I hope not. But honestly, if he hates you this much, maybe it's not worth it? You're so talented. You could go anywhere, Yuri whispered, leaning in close. I'd be so sad if you left, but I'd understand. Hannah didn't have time to answer. The intercom buzzed 3 short, sharp bursts. That was Siwoo's "get in here" signal. When Hannah entered the office, Siwoo was standing by a whiteboard covered in graphs. He looked like he hadn't slept much either. He pointed to the report Hannah had left on his desk that morning. The 2024 audit, he started, his voice flat. You found the discrepancy in the shipping costs. Yes, sir, Hannah said. The numbers didn't match the weight of the cargo. It looked like someone was overcharging the company for ghost shipments. Siwoo turned to face her. My mother told me you caught a similar error 3 years ago. That's how you became her PA. You have a gift for seeing what others want to hide. Hannah felt a small spark of pride, but she kept her face neutral. I just like things to be honest, sir. Honesty is expensive, Siwoo said. He stepped closer, his shadow falling over her. The person behind those ghost shipments is still in this building, Hannah. They've been stealing from my mother for years and they've stayed hidden because they know how to play the game. They probably think I'm just a rich kid who won't notice. Hannah looked at him, surprised. For the first time, she didn't see the rude boss. She saw a man who was deeply protective of his mother's hard work. Is that why you gave me all those files? To see if I would catch them again? I needed to know if I could trust your eyes, Siwoo admitted. He handed her a small encrypted flash drive. This contains the private accounts for the marketing department. I want you to cross-reference them with the shipping logs. Don't tell anyone. Not even your best friend out there. Hannah took the drive, her pulse quickening. This wasn't just busy work. It was a mission. I understand. As she walked out of the office, she caught Yore watching her from the break room door. Yore's smile didn't reach her eyes this time. Hannah felt a sudden chill. In a building full of glass walls, it was hard to know who was watching and who was waiting for you to trip. Hannah sat down and plugged in the drive. She had been the one who yelled at Siwoo for having no soul, but as she looked at the secret data, she realized they were now in the same boat, surrounded by people who smiled to their faces while digging a hole beneath their feet. The office felt different on Tuesday. The air was thick with a kind of quiet electricity that made the hair on Hannah's arms stand up. She spent the entire morning buried in the marketing accounts Siwoo had given her. The deeper she dug, the more she realized that the ghost shipments weren't just mistakes. They were a deliberate trail leading away from a much bigger theft. Around noon, Yore appeared at Hannah's desk. She wasn't carrying coffee this time. Instead, she held a stack of physical mail that needed sorting. Hannah, you've barely looked up all day, Yore said, her voice dripping with fake concern. Are you okay? You're acting so secretive lately. Even the junior staff are starting to ask if you're okay. They think you're being punished. Hannah didn't look away from her screen. I'm just busy, Yore. The new CEO has high standards. He has impossible standards, Yore corrected, leaning over the desk until she was inches from Hannah's ear. I heard a rumor in the break room. They're saying he's looking for a reason to fire you so he can promote someone more loyal. Hannah finally looked up, her eyes tired. Who told you that? Yore shrugged casually. Just gossip. But you know how this place is. Once a rumor starts, it's like fire. I'm just trying to look out for you, babe. If I were you, I'd take it easy. Don't give him more reasons to stress you out. Hannah thanked her and went back to work, but her mind was racing. Was Siwoo really planning to fire her? Or was the office just waiting for her to fail? Later that afternoon, Siwoo called Hannah into his office. He looked tense, his eyes fixed on a security report on his desk. The marketing files, he said, his voice a low rumble. What did you find? It's not just shipping, Hannah explained, placing her notes on his desk. Someone has been creating fake vendor profiles. They've been funneling small amounts of money, not enough to trigger a major audit, but over 3 years, it adds up to nearly $2 million. Siwoo took a deep breath, his jaw tightening. And the access logs? That's the problem, Hannah said softly. The logs show the entries were made from a shared terminal in the junior lounge. Anyone could have done it. Siwoo stood up and walked to the glass wall, looking out at the busy office floor. Someone is smart. They're using the chaos of the transition to hide. Keep digging. I want to name Hannah. I don't care who it is. As Hannah left his office, she felt a wave of dizziness hit her. She hadn't eaten lunch and the stress was starting to take a physical toll. She walked toward the break room to get some water, but she stopped when she heard voices from inside. She thinks she's so special, a voice whispered. It was Yora. But did you see how he looks at her? He hates her. He's just keeping her around until he finds the right person to replace her. I've already started helping him with some of the junior reports. He's actually much nicer when she's not around. Hannah stood frozen in the hallway. The best friend who had been comforting her was the one feeding the fire. Yora wasn't just jealous. She was auditioning for Hannah's job while Hannah was distracted by the audit. Hannah didn't enter the break room. She turned around and walked back to her desk, her heart feeling heavy and cold. She realized then that in this building the rude boss in the office might be her only real ally, while the smiling friend at the next desk was the one holding the knife. By Wednesday, the physical weight of the secret audit was crushing Hannah. She hadn't slept more than 4 hours a night, and the flu she'd been fighting off was finally winning. Her throat felt like it was lined with glass, and her head throbbed in time with the blinking cursor on her screen. Every time she looked up, she saw Yora, her friend, was fluttering around the office, laughing with the senior managers and occasionally glancing at Hannah with a look of fake pity. The rumors had grown wings. Now the entire floor believed Hannah was on the verge of being fired for incompetence. At 2 p.m., Hannah felt a cold shiver run down her spine despite the warm office air. She stood up to go to the restroom to splash cold water on her face, but the world tilted. She gripped the edge of her desk until her knuckles turned white. Miss Hannah. The intercom was like a physical blow. Hannah swallowed hard, gathered her notes and stumbled into Siwoo's office. Siwoo was reviewing a contract, but he stopped the second he saw her. He didn't say anything at first. He just sat there, his dark eyes scanning her face. You look terrible, he said. It wasn't an insult. It was a cold observation. I'm fine, sir, Hannah lied, her voice cracking. I've almost finished the cross-reference for the fake vendor profiles. I just need a few more hours. You're pale and you're shaking, Siwoo said, leaning back in his chair. Go home, Hannah. This isn't a request. Hannah felt a surge of desperate pride. If she left now, Yora would be in this office within 10 minutes, offering to help, and digging through the files Hannah had worked so hard to protect. I can't leave, sir. If I don't finish this today, the trail might go cold. You said accuracy matters. I'm almost there. Siwoo's expression hardened. To him, it looked like the same stubbornness she'd shown in the rain, that hero complex he had warned her about. I don't need a martyr, I need a PA. If you collapse, you're useless to me. Go home. I'm not a martyr, Hannah snapped, her fever making her bolder than usual. I'm the person who has worked here for 3 years while people stole from your mother under her nose. I'm not letting them win because of a headache. The room went silent. Siwoo stared at her, his jaw tight. Fine, he said, his voice dropping to a dangerous level. If you want to stay, stay. But I want the final report on my desk by 9 p.m. tonight. No excuses. Hannah bowed and walked out. She didn't see the flicker of concern that crossed Siwoo's face the moment the door closed. Back at her desk, the afternoon became a blur of pain. Yora stopped by around 5 p.m. Hannah, you look really sick. Why don't you let me take those files to the CEO for you? I'm staying late anyway to help with the junior filing. No, Hannah whispered, not even looking up. I've got it. Suit yourself, Yora said, her voice turning sharp. But don't say I didn't try to help when you finally break. By 8:30 p.m. the office was empty. The silence was heavy. Hannah's vision was tunneling, but she finally hit print. She gathered the papers, her hands trembling so much the pages rattled. She stood up to walk the 10 feet to Siwoo's door, but the floor felt like it was made of water. She made it inside his office. Siwoo was standing by the window, his back to her. Sir, she whispered. The report. It's finished. He turned around, but before he could speak, the world went black for Hannah. The folders slipped from her hands, scattering like white birds across the floor. She didn't feel her knees hit the carpet. She didn't hear Siwoo shout her name. The last thing she felt was a pair of strong, steady arms catching her before she hit the ground. The first thing Hannah smelled was the sharp, clean scent of a hospital. The second thing she felt was a heavy warmth draped over her hand. She opened her eyes slowly, the harsh fluorescent lights making her wince. She wasn't in the office. She was in a private room, the rhythmic beep-beep of a heart monitor filling the silence. Hannah tried to sit up, but a hand gently pressed her back down. "Don't," a voice said. Hannah turned her head. Siu was sitting in a chair pulled close to the bed. His suit jacket was gone, his tie was missing, and his white shirt was wrinkled. He looked exhausted. "Sir." Hannah's voice was barely a whisper. "The report, the files." "The files are safe," Siu said, his voice unusually soft. "You've been out for 6 hours. The doctors say it was a combination of a high fever and extreme physical exhaustion. You pushed yourself until your body literally shut down." Hannah looked away, her eyes stinging. "I had to finish it. I didn't want you to think I was weak." "I never thought you were weak, Hannah," he said. He leaned forward, his dark eyes searching hers. "I thought you were stubborn. I thought you were trying to prove a point. But seeing you fall like that..." He trailed off, his jaw tightening. "I realized I was the one being stubborn. I was so focused on testing you that I didn't see you were breaking." Before Hannah could respond, the door pushed open. Mrs. Kong rushed in, her face pale with worry. She went straight to Hannah's side, ignoring her son. "Oh, my dear girl," Mrs. Kong whispered, stroking Hannah's hair. "Siu called me in a panic. I've been so worried. Why didn't you tell me you were feeling this way?" "I didn't want to disappoint you, ma'am," Hannah said. Mrs. Kong turned a sharp, icy look toward her son. "You did this, didn't you? You pushed her too hard just to see if she would snap. I told you she was the heartbeat of that company, not a machine." Siwoo didn't defend himself. He stood up, taking the verbal blow in silence. "I'll leave you two alone," he said quietly, heading for the door. As he left, Hannah noticed something on the bedside table. A small, familiar-looking digital recorder. Her heart skipped a beat. "Ma'am," Hannah said, turning back to Mrs. Kong. "While I was working, I found things. The rumors in the office, the thefts. It's not just about the money. Someone is trying to tear the company apart from the inside. They're using me to get to Siwoo." Mrs. Kang's eyes narrowed. "I know. I've heard the whispers. People are saying you've been distracting the new CEO, that you're not fit for the role anymore." "It's Yora," Hannah said, the truth finally coming out. "She's the one spreading it. She's the one who wanted my seat." Mrs. Kong went quiet, her expression unreadable. "Rest now, Hannah. Let me and Siwoo handle the snakes. You've done more than enough." Hannah closed her eyes, but she didn't feel at peace. She knew that as long as she was in that hospital bed, Yora was in the office, weaving more lies. The battle wasn't over. It was just moving into the shadows. Hannah returned to the office 3 days later, her body still feeling heavy from the medication. The elevator ride to the 50th floor felt longer than usual. When the doors opened, the usual morning buzz didn't just fade. It stopped. She walked toward her desk, her eyes fixed forward. She could feel the stares of the junior staff. 2 women by the water cooler leaned in, whispering behind their hands. "I heard she fainted on purpose just to get him to carry her," one whispered. "My source says she's being investigated for the missing marketing funds," the other replied. Hannah reached her desk and found it covered in files she hadn't assigned. Standing in her spot, laughing with a senior director, was Yora. She was wearing a new, expensive-looking suit and holding a tablet that belonged to the PA station. "Hannah, you're back," Yora chirped, her voice loud and performative. She rushed over, grabbing Hannah's hands. "We were all so worried. I've been covering your duties so you wouldn't have to stress. The Siu, has been leaning on me quite a bit while you were away." Hannah pulled her hands back. "Thank you, Yora. I'll take it from here." "Oh, but the CEO said I should finish the Q4 projections since I already started them," Yora said, her smile sharpening. "He's in a very bad mood today. You should probably stay out of his way." Hannah ignored her and knocked on Siwoo's door. "Come in," his voice sounded like gravel. Inside the office was a mess of papers. Siwoo looked like he hadn't slept since the hospital. He looked up and for a split second his eyes softened, but then he looked at the door Yora was still standing behind. He put on his CEO mask again. "You're back early," he said. "I'm ready to work, sir," Hannah replied. "Sit," he commanded. He leaned forward. "While you were gone, several anonymous reports came to HR. They claim you were the one who had access to the junior lounge terminal on the nights the funds were moved. They also claim you've been using your position to manipulate the transition for personal gain. Hannah felt the blood leave her face. Sir, you know that's not true. I'm the one who found the theft. I know that, Siwoo said, his voice dropping to a whisper. But the board doesn't. My mother is being pressured to let you go to clean up the company's image. Even she is starting to wonder if keeping you is worth the scandal. Hannah realized then how deep Yore's knife had gone. It wasn't just about the job anymore. They were destroying her name. Is that what you believe, sir? That I'm a scandal? Siwoo looked at her, his expression unreadable. I believe in facts, Hannah. And right now the facts are being buried under a mountain of lies. I need you to stay quiet and let me handle this. Stay quiet. Hannah's voice shook. While she sits in my chair and ruins my life. No. She turned and walked out of the office. She didn't go to her desk. She went straight to the archive room. If Yore wanted to play with facts, Hannah was going to find the one fact that couldn't be ignored. She wasn't just the heartbeat of the company, she was the one who knew where all the ghosts were buried. Hannah spent the next 4 hours in the archives, but the more she looked, the more she realized how well Yore had covered her tracks. Every digital footprint led back to Hannah's login or a shared area where Hannah had been working. Yore hadn't just stolen the money, she had built a cage and trapped Hannah inside it. When Hannah walked back onto the main floor, the atmosphere had shifted from whispers to open hostility. She found Mrs. Kong standing by her desk looking at a printed email. The older woman's face, usually so warm, was set in a line of deep disappointment. Hannah, Mrs. Kong said, her voice trembling slightly. I defended you to the board this morning. But this. An anonymous tip sent photos of your private bank statements. There are deposits here that match the stolen amounts exactly. Hannah felt the world spin. Ma'am, I don't even have that much money in my account. Those have to be forged. They look very real, Hannah, Mrs. Kong sighed, handing her the papers. Maybe my son was right. Maybe I let my affection for you blind me to the truth. Hannah looked up and saw Yore standing a few feet away, leaning against a pillar. Yore didn't look worried, she looked victorious. She even gave Hannah a small mocking pout of sympathy. That was the moment Hannah's spirit finally snapped. Not from fear but from a sudden cold clarity. She realized that as long as she stayed and fought like a subordinate, she would always lose to someone like Yore who played dirty. Hannah didn't cry. She didn't scream. She walked into Siwoo's office without knocking. He looked up, startled, but before he could speak, Hannah placed her ID badge and a handwritten note on his desk. I'm resigning, she said. Her voice was calm, scarily calm. Siwoo stood up slowly. Hannah, wait. I told you to let me handle it. I'm working on. You're working on a way to save the company's image, Hannah interrupted. But I'm working on saving my dignity. If my 3 years of loyalty and the word of the woman who raised me aren't enough to beat a few fake photos, then I don't belong here. Hannah, sit down, Siwoo commanded, his voice rising. No, Hannah said, looking him straight in the eye. You wanted to know if I had a big soul, sir? This is it. I'm leaving because I'm too valuable to be treated like a criminal. You can find your own ghost shipments from now on. She turned and walked out. She didn't stop to pack her things. She didn't look at Mrs. Kong and she didn't look at Yore. She walked straight to the elevator, her head held higher than it had ever been. As the doors closed, she saw Siwoo come charging out of his office, yelling for her to stop. But for the first time since the rain, Hannah was the one in control of the silence. She was gone. The office was dead silent, but it wasn't the peaceful kind. It was the kind of silence that happens right after a bomb goes off. Siwoo stood in the middle of the floor, staring at the closed elevator doors. His mother, Mrs. Kong, sat at Hannah's empty desk, her head in her hands. Yore stepped forward, her face twisted into a mask of fake sadness. I can't believe she just walked out like that. It basically proves she's guilty, doesn't it? Sir, if you need me to officially take over the PA duties. Get out, Siwoo said. His voice was so low it was almost a growl. Sir. Yore blinked, her smile faltering. Everyone get out. Siwoo roared, his voice shaking the glass walls. Go home. Now. As the staff scrambled to leave, Siwoo walked back into his office and slammed the door. He didn't sit down. He went straight to the security server he had installed in secret 2 days ago. He hadn't told Hannah, and he certainly hadn't told the board. He didn't look at the money trails. He looked at the physical access logs for the archive room. For 3 hours, Siwoo sat in the dark watching grainy footage. He saw Hannah entering the room looking tired and desperate. But then he saw something else. At 2 a.m. on the night Hannah was in the hospital, a figure in a hoodie had entered the archives using a master key. The figure didn't look for files. They went straight to the back corner and planted a small black device behind the server rack. Siwoo zoomed in. The person paused to check their phone. The light from the screen hit their face for a split second. It was Yore. But she wasn't alone. In the reflection of the glass, Siwoo saw the person she was talking to on the phone. It was the head of the marketing department, the man who had been helping her funnel the ghost funds for years. Siwoo didn't wait for morning. He called his mother. He called the police. And then he drove. He found Hannah sitting on a bench in a small park near her apartment. It was raining again, the same soft soul mist from the day they met. She didn't have an umbrella. She just sat there looking at the city lights. Siwoo stopped the car and ran toward her. He didn't care about his expensive shoes or his dry-cleaned suit. Hannah. She looked up, her eyes red from crying, but her face hardened the moment she saw him. I already resigned, sir. There's nothing left to say. I found it, he panted, stopping in front of her. The device. The footage. Yuri didn't just forge the documents. She was using a signal jammer to frame your login. She's at the police station right now, Hannah. Her and the marketing director. Hannah stood up slowly, the rain soaking her hair. Does your mother know? She knows, Siwoo said. He stepped closer, his voice breaking. She wants to apologize. He feels terrible. But more importantly, I need to apologize. You told me I had a small soul. And you were right. I was so afraid of being played for a fool that I treated the only person who actually cared about this company like an enemy. Hannah looked at him for a long time. The Prince of Apex was standing in the mud, shivering and soaked, looking at her with a raw honesty she hadn't seen before. I'm not coming back as a piece, Siwoo, she said firmly. Siwoo nodded, a small, sad smile touching his lips. I know. My mother wants you to take over the strategy team. You caught a $2 million theft twice. You're overqualified to hold my coffee. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, familiar coral-colored lip gloss. It had fallen out of her bag when she collapsed. He held it out to her. I don't want a PA, he whispered. I want to be the kind of man who deserves to stand next to someone with a soul as big as yours. Tomorrow, can we start over? Not within the office walls. How about a date? Hannah looked at the lip gloss, then at the man holding it. She took it from his hand, her fingers brushing against his. Tomorrow, she said, a small smile finally breaking through the shadows. But you're still paying for dinner. Consider it a fine for all this. Siwoo laughed, a real bright sound that echoed through the quiet park. He held his umbrella over her, and as they walked toward the car, the heartbeat of the company was finally steady again.